Realism. Here's a quote from an artist who is a realism artist, and he kind of borders on impressionism. This is Manet. So he said, "One must be of one's time and paint what one sees." So here's kind of a summary of realism that you can understand that quote also. Though never a coherent group, realism was recognized as the first modern movement in art, which rejected traditional forms of art, literature, and social organization as outmoded in the wake of the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. Beginning in France in the 1840s, realism revolutionized painting, expanding conceptions of what constituted art. Working in a chaotic era marked by revolution and widespread social change, realist painters replaced the idealistic images and literary conceits of traditional art with real-life events, giving the margins of society similar weight to grand history paintings and allegories. Their choice to bring everyday life into their canvases was an early manifestation of the avant-garde desire to merge art and life, and their rejection of pictorial techniques like perspective prefigured the many 20th century definitions and redefinitions of modernism. All right, so hopefully this will explain everything I just read. So this term avant-garde, this is in reaction to the rigidity of academic training. Some French artists began to consider themselves members of an avant-garde, meaning an advance guard. So it actually comes from a military term. The term was coined by the French military during the Napoleonic era to describe those forward units of an advancing army that's scouting territory to occupy. So that's what an avant-garde really meant. Avant-garde artists saw themselves as working in advance of an increasingly bourgeois society. So these are radical thinkers, these artists and architects, and they're breaking away from this academic tradition. So they're in the forefront, right? They're paving the way for these new ideas. And then the context at the time, this is what's going on. Realism is an art movement that's happening in France. So at France during this time, the prices are rising. So we have rising food prices, you have high unemployment, political disenfranchisement, government inaction, and all of this is igniting a rebellion. So this context spurred the realism movement. And then you have the author Charles Dickens, who's writing about the real lives of the urban lower class. So this is what we're going to see in the artwork. It's about this urban lower class or the middle working class. All right, overall, this is what I would write on your notes. Realism is not a style. So if you look at all these different realism paintings, it's not really one unifying style. It's more of a commitment to paint the modern world honestly, without turning away from the brutal truths of life for all people, poor as well as the privileged. So down here, these are by Manet. So Manet kind of borders on realism and impressionism. Like this one here is almost more impressionism. All right, first realism artwork is The Stonebreakers by Gustave Courbet. We only really need to know his last name, Courbet, 1849. This was destroyed in World War II in 1945. This is oil on canvas, and it's really large, or it was really large. We'll go back to that. All right, at the Nelson Museum, this is our realism gallery right here. So we have a Courbet on the left and then a Millet on the right. All right, let's look back to Romanticism. So if we compare the Stonebreakers without knowing anything about it, what differences can we compare to with Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People? Or what similarities can we see? How is this similar and how is this different? So in class, we talked about Delacroix almost has, it's more dramatic, it's more theatrical. It's almost like there's a fan blowing and you have all this fabric that's whipping around her body, referencing the ancient classical Greek sculptures or artwork. And then we also talked about on the left, there's no faces being portrayed. On the right, we have different classes and we have different ages. So you have young and then you have older. We also have young and then we have older when we look at Stonebreakers, but we're not seeing any facial expressions. Their backs are turned to us. It's a really awkward pose that they're both in. All right, so I said this was large, it's about 5 by 8 feet. So this is typically a size that would be used for history paintings. So we talked about that in the summary, how realism artists are now depicting the real world around them, but to this same grandeur size that history paintings would be painted in. We're not going to read from the textbook. All right, I believe this is from the textbook. You have the young figure straining on the left to lift a rock, wearing tattered shirt, older companion on the right wearing traditional clothing of a peasant. They're both faceless. The artist is using dull, dark colors and very awkward poses. Overall makes the composition gloomy and degrading. I would definitely include this in your notes. The roughness of the brushstrokes, right? They're not smooth, is representing the brutality of modern life. Again, not smooth. And then we do have the sky patch on the top right has been described as hope. So we can compare that to Delacroix's painting because liberty leading the people is a symbol of hope, right? This rebellion. All right, function. So by painting on a large grand scale, he is venerating or honoring, celebrating the peasant laborers as heroes, making a political statement about the brutality of modern life. This represents disenfranchised peasants on whose backs modern life was being built. And then you also have the young boy on the left representing the grim future, which is the old man on the right, broken in by the labor. Like there's really no escape from this cycle. This is a defining work of realism by the leader of the movement, which is Courbet. Said it. All right, we have an unidealized, realistic depiction of the lower class. Again, this is a breakaway from the tradition. This is described as the first socialist painting, and then I said it was destroyed in World War II. It was being transported, and that vehicle was bombed. All right, next artwork is a lithograph. Again, we don't need to know the artist's first name. French artist, so Damier. And this is called Nadar, Raising Photography to the Height of Art. And this is kind of poking fun of this photographer, Nadar. All right, what is a lithograph? I don't think we've had a lithograph before. So it's a form of printmaking. We've had etchings, we've had woodcuts. Here's another lithograph that he did, poking fun of the king and his appetite that is ongoing, never satisfied. He did get in trouble for creating that artwork. All right, so a lithograph is a printing process where you're drawing on a stone. Method of printing with the stone looks like a drawing, and then you can create multiples using that stone. All right, Damier is known for his political cartoons. You can also call political cartoons satirical drawings. So Gargantua is the one that he did of the king, depicting the king of France as a fictional figure known for his insatiable appetite, never satisfied king exploiting his subjects and growing fat at their expense. And he was charged and sentenced to 6 months of jail for inciting contempt and hatred of the French king and insulting the king. Here's another lithograph that he did. Can you see what's going on there? Can you see the child down here? I didn't notice her when I first saw this. All right, so we don't need to write this in your notes, just another piece of his artwork. So workers in Paris are rioting against harsh working conditions. Soon after, a sniper kills a police officer. So then the police, in retaliation, kill a number of residents of the sniper's building. So this gruesomely depicts a family of silk weavers who were slaughtered in their beds by the French National Guard. All right, back to this artwork that's in our 250. So he is critiquing photography and society. So how do you think he's doing that? So we need to know who Nadar is. So Nadar is one of the most prominent photographers in Paris. The caption beneath this lithograph says, Nadar is elevating photography to the height of art. So he's well known for taking the first aerial photograph of Paris 4 years earlier in 1858. He did this from the basket of a hot air balloon. There's a story he was once swept away to Germany and dragged 25 miles over rough terrain before he could even stop himself. So here he's being portrayed in his excitement to capture the perfect shot. He's about to lose his top hat. All right, so how does Nadar elevating photography to the height of art critique photography? So he's questioning whether art is a valid form of art. Is it art or is it science? This is a continuation of this debate and this discussion. So photography was considered to be more mechanical than artistic because of the link to the industrial age associated with mass production. A French romantic painter declared, from this day, painting is dead. The art of painting miniature portraits was no longer needed. This was replaced by daguerreotypes, right? That first form of photography for only 12 cents. So photographers began insisting their craft was a fine art. And then a writer said photography was more than an art, it was a solar phenomenon where the artist collaborates with the sun. So the function of this, Damier seized the opportunity to mock at Nadar's claims of raising photography to the height of art. All right, so below him, you can see on all those buildings in Paris is the word photography or photograph. It's very intrusive to have this idea of a man flying above with a camera. And overall, this is a comment on both the success of the new medium and the debate about the artistic value of the medium. So both of these works, right, are talking about blurring the lines between art and technology. You have the daguerreotype by Daguerre on the left, and then you have a lithograph commenting on Nadar taking an aerial photograph. All right, next video is going to be all about Manet.